Hey guys, do you think modern winters are harsh? That's only because you've never experienced a medieval peasant's winter. Imagine waking up on a January morning to find your drinking water frozen solid, your firewood long gone since last night, and the cold creeping into your dreams. No heating, no supermarket, and no reason to get out of bed, except if you don't start a fire, you'll freeze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments and what time it is for you. I always love seeing who's joining this sleepy journey worldwide. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with no feeling in your toes, not because they've vanished, but because you can't feel them anymore. Your breath turns into mist inside your house. The thatched roof above rustles, whispering, "Good luck, weakling." You curl tighter under a wool blanket that survived 3 generations, nestled between a father snoring like battlefield drums and a little sister who sometimes stole all your body heat at night. The small house you live in is a masterpiece of medieval minimalism. Mud walls, thatched roof, a door just wide enough for the wind to come in but not quite enough to shut correctly. The floor is packed with earth, and on that floor lies a goat skin so old, even the goat wouldn't recognize it. Blanket is a generous term. It's a patchwork of burlap, worn cloaks, and desperate hope. You lie sandwiched between your parents and little sister. Not a ham sandwich, but one stuffed with snoring and cold feet. The fire died out at midnight. You know this because your nose, the only part of you exposed, has gone numb. Inside the hearth, the ashes are cold, with one charred log lying alone like your will to live during deep winter. You sit up. Big mistake. Your head smacks into the ceiling beam. You groan. Your sister rolls over and yanks the last blanket from your shoulder. Your father snores louder like he's winning. You crawl out of the straw bed. Your feet hit the frozen ground. No socks. Of course not. Your mother repurposed your only pair as a potholder. You fumble toward the hearth, grab the iron poker, and start digging through ashes. Each breath you blow feels like it's freezing midair. Finally, a tiny red ember flickers, feeble as a winter firefly. You keep blowing, and add some dry grass and twigs. A spark catches. You sigh in relief, and then immediately cough as the smoke smacks you in the face. The goat, Greta, grumpy and dramatic, shuffles over and stares at you like, "Oh, now you decide to contribute?" She lies by the hearth, claiming the warmest spot in the house. You consider arguing, but she has horns. You search for breakfast. Nothing's in the pot, but the vegetable broth is frozen into a jelly slab. Your mother produces a chunk of stale bread, more complex than stone, and breaks it into 3 pieces. Your sister looks at her piece like she's trying to memorize it for her famine diary. You chew yours, and chew, and chew. It tastes like wood, and somehow also disappointment. But at least it tastes like something. Outside, the snow continues to fall, soft, silent, but relentless. You peek through the door's crack and see the village children sweeping paths to the chicken coop with brooms. A rooster perches silently on the roof, clearly too cold to bother with his morning duties. You throw on another cloak, tie it around your body, and head out to fetch water. The well is far. The snow reaches your knees. Every step is a battle against biting wind and crunchy frost. Your hands turn red, your nose runs, and your spirit quietly fractures. You return home with half a bucket of water, the rest is ice, and the swagger of a weathered warrior. Inside, the family huddles by the weak fire. Your mother reheats the porridge with sheer determination. Your father slices turnips with a rusty knife. Your sister pets the goat, hoping it'll lay an egg or something. And at that moment, even though you're still cold and hungry, you feel something strange. Warmth. Not from the fire, but from the people. From the shared laughter when someone trips over the straw. From the gratitude in their eyes when you coax the fire back to life. You know tomorrow will be cold again. The firewood will still be scarce. The bread will still double as a construction material. But tonight, you made it through. And honestly, that's not a bad start. You settle beside the ashes, hoping some lingering warmth still clings to the air. Your youngest sister is wearing an oversized tunic that everyone in the family once wore as a child. The collar is torn, the sleeves hang down to her knees, and the bottom hem is slightly singed from that infamous porridge overheating incident. She clings to it like treasure, because it's the thickest piece of clothing in the house. Your mother rummages in the corner and pulls out a bundle of flax cord, beginning to weave a new cloak for you. Not because you're special, but because the old one has been repurposed as a makeshift outhouse curtain. Everything in the house is damp. The walls are wet. The blankets are damp. Even the cat is damp. You swear you saw a cockroach skid across the floor from the condensation. It hasn't rained, but your home behaves as though it's weathering an indoor monsoon. You poke at your boots. They've hardened into some unidentifiable shape. You shove your feet in and discover that the soles have developed a delicate sheet of ice. You decide to call it natural gel cushioning. Sometimes you imagine a modern person visiting and saying something like, "Oh wow, a thatched cottage. So rustic and close to nature." You'd invite them to stay one night without blankets, firewood, or dinner. By morning, you're not sure they'd survive long enough to write about their authentic experience. At this point, you start putting into practice the survival tricks every peasant knows. Stuffing straw into your tunic, wrapping scraps of cloth around your wrists, and, most importantly, never stepping outside until sunlight has physically touched the doorstep. Winter sunlight is a luxury. It arrives late, shy, and fragile, like a child giving their first school presentation. But whether it's real or just a hallucination, you rush to meet it like it's falling gold. Medieval folk didn't have modern fireplaces. Most didn't even have chimneys. The smoke rose straight up to the rafters, clinging to the beams, then drifted sideways, coating everything in a fine layer of soot. You grew up with smoke in your hair, clothes, and memories. Outsiders might think your house had just hosted a sacrificial ritual. But to you, that smell was survival. You glance at your father, one leg propped up near the hearth like he's on a spa holiday. He's sipping turnip porridge with a wooden spoon missing half the handle. Every time he exhales, steam from the bowl mixes with his breath, forming a little floating cloud in the foggy room. The hen, easily the most disgruntled household member, hops onto your lap, demanding to share the warm spot. You look at her. She looks at you. Both of you sigh. One human and one chicken, both reconsidering their decision to settle near the equator without reading the climate terms and conditions. Everyone in your house has their warmth strategy. Your father wears 3 hats at once, one of which is made from an old sleeve. Your mother places hot bricks inside her socks, until discovering that's how the last sock caught fire. As for you, you've mastered the art of shallow breathing so your lungs don't freeze. True survival skills. You know the rest of the village is doing the same thing, huddling by ashy hearths, counting slivers of sunlight, and wishing for a blanket that mice haven't chewed. You remember your grandfather's story about a cold winter. The ink froze in its pot, and they had to carve the letters with a knife. You used to laugh at that, but now, staring at your ink jar and the crack running across its surface, you stay quiet. At last, the fire flickers to life. The room fills with the familiar warm scent of smoke and old fabric, and breakfast is slightly burnt at the bottom of the pot. But it's the smell of life. You exhale deeply. Not because the cold is gone, but because you've made it through another morning. You rise, brush the straw off your coat, grab the water bucket, and step outside. The wind still bites. The snow still falls. But you smile. You're not frozen. You're not broken. And in this world, sometimes that's enough. Putting on clothes in a medieval winter wasn't so much getting dressed as it was preparing for battle. You stood in the middle of the house, teeth chattering, staring at the pile of garments like some unsolvable riddle. Where to begin? The itchy wool shirt, or the even itchier wool trousers? You chose both at the same time. The first layer was a thin, cold, and utterly useless linen shirt, except for protecting you from being scratched by the second layer. A hand-woven wool tunic, thick, scratchy, and never washed because it was simply too cold for anyone to volunteer to rinse it. Then came the trousers, also wool, itchy, and somehow smaller than last year. Maybe you grew. Perhaps they shrunk from spending a week absorbing turnip steam in the cupboard. You stuffed straw between the layers of cloth. Who needs a puffer jacket when you've got dry farm waste? A bit of hay around your chest, some leaves tucked around your waist. You felt like a cow pretending to be human, but warm, at least for the first 5 minutes. Socks? Socks were a flexible concept. Some days you use old dish rags, some days torn sleeves, and some days you pretended feet didn't exist. You pulled on the family cloak, the one passed around by everyone in the house. It smelled like firewood, smoke, and secrets. You didn't know the last time it was washed, possibly during the previous dynasty. The wool cap was knitted by your grandmother one long-forgotten winter. It was the size of a melon and shaped like something. But it covered your ears, and that was enough. You wrapped a scarf around your neck, then around your face, until only your eyes were visible. At this point, you resembled a walking bundle of cloth, or perhaps a ninja turnip. The movement was complex, but at least you were warm, where it mattered most. The strange part? No matter how many layers you wore, you were still cold. Not the romantic kind of cold where a woman trembles in a trench coat. This was the cold where you genuinely feared sneezing because it might snow. Medieval people didn't have thermal wear. They had to add another layer. Still cold? Add another? Still freezing? Shove a cat inside your tunic. Colder still? Sit on the cat. Occasionally, you'd see someone in the village wearing fur and daydream a little, until you realized that coat probably cost more than your entire goat population. And you didn't even have a goat population. You had Greta, and she wouldn't appreciate a conversation about sharing her coat. Fur was the designer brand. The lords passing through the village wore cloaks made of ermine, fox, or some other rare beast. Always had a servant following behind to hold the hem out of the mud. You'd watch them from afar while picking ice off your nose and think, I wonder if the ermine's cold. Your winter fashion came in 3 primary colors: mud brown, soot gray, and mossy green, all gently dusted with ash and smoke. You didn't aim to look good. You just hoped passers-by would look at you and think, hey, that one's still alive. You once heard someone tried using beeswax as a water-repellent coat treatment. The result, yes, it repelled moisture. But it also attracted every ant in the region. Some folks wrapped parchment around their feet. Some stuffed warm pebbles in their pockets. Some climbed into a hay pile and refused to come out until April. And then there was you, finally dressed in the last layer, waddling to the door like a walking pillow. Your outfit made a soft swish sound, like a possessed mop. You went about your daily chores, chopping wood, checking on the chickens, running into a neighbor dressed almost identically, except he smelled more like dried fish. You nodded at each other in silence. Talking was risky. Your lips might crack. And the strangest part? You got used to it. The itching, the freezing, it all faded into the background. You thought about dinner, about how much firewood was left, about how the sun seemed a little higher today than yesterday. Tiny things, but enough to make you feel okay. When evening came, you stepped inside, hung your layers on wooden pegs, and slumped by the hearth. Your clothes steamed gently like they were exhaling. The cat curled on your lap, purring like a mini furnace. Your sibling snuggled beside you like a mobile hay ball. You peeled off the last scarf, stretched your arms and legs, and felt that even though you looked like a walking laundry pile all day, you survived. And in this age, that counted as a victory. You know you're truly hungry when you start staring at a cold pot of barley porridge like it's your last hope on earth. This morning's breakfast was half a boiled turnip, split 3 ways. Your little sibling gave you a warning glance as you eyed their portion. If you eat fast, I'm telling Mom. Hunger in the Middle Ages wasn't the oops, I skipped lunch kind of hunger. It was an ache in your gut that made you fall asleep empty and dream of bread. Only to wake up chewing on your own sleeve because in the dark, It looked vaguely like a loaf. Once, you dreamt of eating a roast chicken, only to wake up with a feather in your mouth. The house hen had shed right onto your face. Food was scarce. And in winter, it was like playing the lottery where the prize was just not dying. You checked the chicken coop, and there were no eggs. I asked Mom about baking flour, and there was none. I asked Dad about the stash of dried fish. He pretended to be asleep. Every meal required invention. Boiled turnip, roasted turnip, mashed turnip, raw turnip, if you were in a hurry. One day the whole family had hot water and salt soup. Your little sibling whispered, "Tastes like imaginary meat." Everyone laughed, because if you didn't, you'd cry. You tried foraging for any wild greens the snow hadn't buried. You remembered a patch of nettles. They tasted awful, but they had nutrients. You dug them up, boiled them, and everyone ate with the facial expression of someone sipping medieval NyQuil. Still, a meal's a meal. Villagers told stories about the Great Famine, people chewing bark, a grandmother eating shoe leather. You thought that was folklore, until you saw older man Henri gnawing on a sandal strap during the coldest week of the year. You didn't ask questions. You just handed him a bowl of water and looked away. You once heard someone boil bones for 3 days trying to make nutritional broth. In the end, the bones dissolved, and so did hope. During bad harvest years, it got worse. Seeds wouldn't sprout, barley would mold, and your family once traded with a neighbor for 2 carrots. And that neighbor still hasn't forgiven you. Your mom used to say, "When you're hungry, don't dwell on it." She meant don't think about it, but you heard, "Don't use your soul." Either way, both worked. The elders always ate last. Kids came first, because they had to grow. You once watched your grandma sip soup that looked like dishwater, then quietly hand her previous slice of turnip to your little sister. And in that moment, you realized that love has a taste, if seasoned with sacrifice. Even in hunger, your family found humor. One night, your mom pretended the soup was roast chicken. Your dad mimed a knife slicing through imaginary meat. Your sibling drummed on their bowl with a spoon. And you, the hungriest of all, smiled as your stomach growled like an off-key harp. Sometimes, you daydreamed of the future, where food lived in cold boxes, not windowsills. Bread came pre-sliced, and butter didn't contain rogue feathers. You chuckled. Your sibling asked, "What are you thinking?" You said, "About soup that cooks itself." The whole family burst out laughing. Tonight's dinner was twice crisped porridge. You had just enough grain for one last batch. You stretched it with barley, tossed in some dried onions, and the secret weapon, a few drops of pork fat you'd been hoarding all week. You carried the pot to the table. Everyone sat quietly, inhaling the steam like it was the aroma of a royal banquet. Mom lit a candle. Dad poured warm water, if you were lucky. Your siblings set out the bowls. The meal began, not rushed, not noisy, just the soft clink of spoons, quiet slurps, and eyes full of thanks. You looked around. The house was still poor, still cold, still lacking. But there was laughter. There was family. There was a little food. Not enough, but real. And you quietly thought to yourself, "I made it one more day without eating a shoelace." The fireplace in your house, or, more accurately, the blackened smoke pit in the middle of the room, was never just a place to cook. It was the center of the universe, the physical and emotional heart of the entire family. Without the fireplace, there was no fire. Without fire, there is no life. And without life, well, you get the idea. Every morning began the same way. The first question was, did the fire catch? The second, do we still have wood? After a night so cold it bit your bones, you'd crawl out of bed and shuffle over to the ashes like you were performing some ancient fire-summoning ritual. You'd scrape at the coals, searching for a lingering ember, and blow on it like your breath held magic. If you were lucky, a tiny glow would appear. If not, you'd start the familiar cycle of frustration. Blow, smoke, cough, sigh, repeat. Your cat, the most pragmatic creature alive, wouldn't even come near until the flames were fully alive. It sat perched on a rafter, watching you with a look that was half contempt and half even more contempt. You'd grab some logs from the corner of the room. Most were damp, moldy, or had previously served as furniture legs. But wood was wood. You stacked them, added straw, struck a spark, and began chanting to the fire gods like a wizard. Once you swore the fire only caught because you yelled at it hard enough. Eventually the flames leaped up. And the smoke? Oh, it went everywhere. Because your house had no chimney. There was a hole in the roof that was supposed to help, but all it did was let in the wind and swirl the smoke around everyone's faces. Your dad coughed, your mom snapped, "Shut the door!" You shouted back, "The draft is helping the smoke escape." And the goat, Greta, peed in the hearth corner like she did every morning. Cooking around the fire was an art form. Every meal was a small war. Porridge boiled over. Turnips scorched to the bottom. Wooden spoons fell into the ashes. Once, you flung a ladle too hard and launched soup onto your little sibling's lap. They screamed like they'd been set ablaze. In reality, the soup was cold, but emotional damage, very real. The fire was also the hub of daily life. Everyone sat around it, warming hands, propping feet on one another, telling stories, sharpening knives, mending clothes, and arguing. Who used the last log? Whose fault is the smoke? Where's the chicken? Answer, usually on your shoulder. Fire brought out everyone's true self. The grumpy got grumpier. The lazy always sat closest. The selfless were always the coldest. You once tried lighting wet wood by pouring fat over it. The result was more smoke than flame, and the entire family had to evacuate for 15 minutes. Your dad called it smoke cleansing to ward off sickness. You suspected he didn't want to admit it was a mistake. Kids constantly came dangerously close to falling in. Not all the way, but there were slips, shoves, and bold attempts to snatch roasting potatoes. One time, your little sibling set their scarf on fire. Your mom calmly snuffed it with a shovel and kept stirring the pot. At night, the fire was your only light. In the pitch-black dark, with no electricity and no candles to spare, the flickering flames danced across the mud walls, casting wobbly, eerie shadows. You stared into them and imagined another world where you had a fireplace of your own, dry firewood every day, and didn't have to share your seat with a goat. But even in chaos, the hearth was where everyone gathered. Smoke stung your eyes. Wood was always scarce. The seating was tight. But fire was life. You remembered one snowstorm in particular. No one slept. Everyone huddled around the flames. Your mom told ghost stories. Your dad played the jaw harp. Your sibling drew doodles in the ash. And you just sat there, silently watching the embers glow red in the dark. And for a moment, you felt warm. History talks about grand castles with hearths the size of your whole house. But honestly, the poor man's hearth, small, smoky, dusty, witnessed the most. The laughter, the tears, the sleep, the meals, the late-night whispers. You glanced at the fire now, finally steady, burning strong. Your hands were warm again. Your feet weren't numb anymore. Your sibling dozed off on your shoulder. The cat purred beneath your stool. And even as the wind howled outside, you knew, at least right now, you were okay. And you also knew that tomorrow, you'd have to start the fire again. Do you think you're living through a typical medieval winter? Think again. Because this year, like many other years over several centuries, you're living in what's charmingly called the Little Ice Age. Sounds cute, right? It's not. Not even close. This isn't the kind of slightly colder than usual chill. This cold makes wheat shrink from embarrassment. Rivers freeze so solid you can set up a marketplace on them. And villagers start to wonder if the sun god has quit. You wake up one morning to find the water bucket has turned into a block of ice. Not a thin layer of frost, not cold to the touch. A solid, crystalline, slap-you-in-the-face chunk of ice. You have to break it to wash your face, and if you're not careful, a shard might fly up and smack you like nature throws rocks. The ground is as hard as brick. Whenever you dig with a hoe, it's like picking a fight with the moon. You unearth a single shriveled turnip the size of a garlic clove, and your mother cradles it like treasure. "At least it's alive," she says. The livestock are skinny. They huddle together in the barn, shivering like rehearsing for a synchronized misery routine. Your cow, Beatrix, used to be cheerful, mooing like a musical instrument. Now she stares at you as if to ask, "Is there even a point anymore?" Even the sky feels cold, gray, empty. It hangs above you like a damp blanket you can't pull over yourself. Every time it snows, you groan, "Again?" The sky answers by snowing harder. You once shouted at the clouds, "That's enough!" And the clouds continued as if they couldn't hear. Or worse, they could and didn't care. The whole village starts getting a little superstitious. Some say the cold came because the forest spirits were angry. Others say God is testing the faithful. A few blame the widows for singing hymns off-key and upsetting the sun. You blame the goat. Greta. Greta showed up the same week the cold began. She's never cold, never sneezes. He always knows where the warmest corner is. You once saw her stare at the sky, then turn away with an ominous expression. You suspect she's a weather spy. No one believes you. They even scolded you for blaming the only living thing still laying eggs. An older man in the village claims winters weren't always like this. He says there was a time when the trees stayed green in spring. Rivers didn't freeze to the bottom, and bread didn't have to be hammered off a block. But then, the shift came. One cold year, another, and winter stuck around like bacon grease on a cold pan. The village priests start holding sun prayer rituals every week. They burn incense, chant, and draw chalk circles. Once, they lit so many candles that the whole church was filled with smoke. Everyone started coughing but assumed it was holy. A priest once declared, "I feel warmth returning," and promptly fainted because he was standing too close to the flame. Historians today call it the Little Ice Age, beginning around the 14th century and lasting until the 19th. It wasn't always Arctic-level freezing, but it was enough to change how people lived, ate, and even complained. And you keep surviving. You learn to dry clothes over smoke, boil water in a cracked jug, and stretch half an onion across 2 meals. You know it's the coldest day when even the rooster stays under the blanket and refuses to crow. You once held your hands too close to the fire and burned off a bit of your sleeve. You didn't tell your mom. You just flipped it around and used the other side. In medieval times, they called that resource management. As for meals, they're mostly surprise additions. Today, maybe porridge. Tomorrow, wind soup. You've eaten something called ice stew, shaved snow boiled with salt. Not tasty, but hey, it was novel. You think about spring like it's a myth, something people used to talk about, like dragons or soft bread. You imagine green grass, birdsong, and sunlight on your face. Then you wake up because a melted ice drip fell onto your nose. And even though you don't believe in fairies or climate curses, you light a tiny candle, place it beneath a sun drawing on the wall, and quietly close your eyes. With every ounce of warmth still left in your heart, you wish tomorrow would be less cold than today. This winter is so bitterly cold that you think, surely no one can get anything done in this weather. And then you remember Newton. Yes, that Newton, curly-haired, apple-falling law-writing legend, who invented half of modern science while stuck at home during a plague and in the cold. Meanwhile, you're trying to start a fire with dry bread and wondering if your brain has frozen. Newton, he's out there, in the countryside, sitting under an apple tree during a face-slapping frost, casually inventing gravity. It feels unfair. Back in 1665 to 1666, Newton lived through a nightmare of a year. The Great Plague was tearing through cities, Cambridge University shut down, and he had to retreat to the countryside. And instead of curling up and shivering under a blanket like the rest of us medieval folk, He stared at light through a window and invented calculus. You stare at the light coming through a crack in the wall and think, great, another draft. They call it Newton's annus mirabilis, his miracle year. While most of us in the Middle Ages are just trying not to die of hypothermia, he's philosophizing about optics and inertia. You once wrote your name with ink on paper without smudging it and felt like a genius. Imagine sitting down like Newton to contemplate. You light a candle, which burns halfway, then goes out from a draft. Open the only book in the house, warped, damp, likely chewed by mice. Grab your wooden quill, tip is blunt, and try to write. Your hands tremble. The ink is congealing. The light is dim. And just as you think you've had a big idea, the goat knocks everything over. Most of the time, your goal is to keep your brain from freezing. Each morning, you do a quick mental check to see if you still remember your name. Your head feels heavy each night, not from pondering philosophy, but from wearing 3 wool hats. School is canceled for winter, because the teachers are chopping firewood or hunting for food. Kids aren't learning math, they're learning how not to fall face first into snowdrifts. The chalkboard's cracked, the chalk is damp, the ink, frozen. You once tried to teach your sister to count using beans, but every bean is a potential meal, so she refused and hid them in her pocket. On endless snow days, you wonder, maybe I'm on the verge of a great discovery too. Then you glance down and see your hands scraping frozen chicken poop off the floor and decide probably not. Sure, Newton's brilliance is inspiring, but on a typical winter afternoon, if you manage not to burn your hands lighting the fire, avoid a scratch from the cat fighting for warm spots, and escape water fetching duty, that's a win. One day, you try to create, mixing snow and ink to write a winter poem. Result, torn paper, purple fingers, and a chicken stomping through your art. Still, Newton might have had bad days too. No one wrote about when he tripped on black ice, or accidentally set his notes on fire by putting them too close to the hearth. History tends to skip over the human bits, like Newton possibly stuffing straw into his shoes, or the fact that he may have shivered through his first formula. That makes you, surviving winter with turnip soup and frozen socks, feel a little better. At the very least, you've learned something from Newton. Use your time well. You've learned to mend an old coat, twist rope from scraps, and knit a sock from leftover wool. It's not rocket science, but it's still inventive. You sit near the fire, flipping through faded pages by flickering candlelight. The cat curls up in your lap. Your sister dozes beside you. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the smoke rises. You may not be inventing anything, but you're still here. You close the book, think of Newton one last time, and murmur, "He had laws of motion. But I have 7 layers of clothing, and a very warm goat." Not bad at all. You thought a medieval winter was just cold, hunger, and smoke? Oh no. Sometimes, people also needed a little madness. And when life got hard enough, the only way to survive was to laugh louder than your stomach growled. So, in the freezing heart of December, your entire village decided to throw something called the Festival of Misrule, a day when all rules were kicked out the door, and the crowd gave itself full permission to be ridiculous. On that day, someone would be chosen as the Lord of Chaos, or, less politely, the King of Foolery. And yes, this time it was you. Not because you were clever or charming. Number. You sneezed loudly during the drawing of lots. It's a divine sign. They dragged you into the village square, crowned you with a wreath of turnips and chicken feathers, draped you in the village elder's old bath curtain, and declared, "From now until midnight, you are our king." You tried to say, "I decline." The crowd shouted in unison, "You can't." Thus, you became the sovereign of silliness. Your first decree? Make the village elder dance like a rooster. He complied immediately, and shockingly well. Second decree? No one may say the word turnip for 1 full hour. Say it by accident? A face full of flour. Who came up with this game? You did. Just now. The whole village seemed to exhale months' worth of winter tension. Someone removed their shirt and danced, then coughed for a week. Someone dressed as a goat and mimicked Greta the whole evening. The kids chased chickens, the chickens chased cats, and the cats fled to the rafters with a look that screamed, "I want nothing to do with this." The feast happened around the most enormous bonfire the village had ever built. People brought whatever scraps they had left. Roasted root vegetables, still turnips, but nobody said the name. Porridge thick enough to chew, and a slab of salted meat someone had kept since last year, too afraid to eat it until now, in case it talked back. As temporary monarch, you sat on a throne made from 2 upside-down barrels and a broken chair. A burlap sack served as your royal carpet. You were given full power to issue decrees, the more absurd, the better. You declared, anyone who doesn't laugh today must scratch the feet of the person beside them. The result? A village in hysterics. Nobody dared keep a straight face. The Feast of Misrule was authentic, celebrated across medieval Europe. In England, France, and even monasteries, they'd choose a lord of misrule or an abbot of unreason, giving them the power to flip the social order for a day. Peasants became kings, kids scolded adults, monks sang silly songs, and all of it was allowed. It didn't make anyone richer, or less hungry. But for one day, people laughed. And somehow, that laughter warmed them in ways soup couldn't. As night fell and firelight flickered, the festival shifted into local legend hour. Whoever told the best ghost story won. A tiny honey cake. You spun a tale about a flying goat who carried the spirit of spring, and Greta sneezed at just the right moment. The crowd erupted. You won. Children gathered at your feet, begging for royal favors. You declared, "Tonight, all children eat before the adults." They cheered. Your mother glared from across the fire, but smiled because today was no rules day. Some villagers drank too much. Some passed out in hay piles. Some sang the wrong lyrics to every song. No one cared. In a cold, gray, endless winter, one night of joyful nonsense was enough to remind you that you are human, not just a fire-starting machine. You looked around. Friends, family, neighbors, everyone covered in flour, wearing ridiculous hats, eyes sparkling with laughter. And you thought, if winter is a war, then tonight was the fireworks. When the rooster, your only timekeeper, took its cue at midnight, you surrendered your throne. The turnip crown came off. The curtain cape was returned to the village elder's clothesline. You were once again just you, the third best fire starter in the household. But you knew tomorrow would be cold again. Still, the memory of this wild, ridiculous night, where you were king, old folks danced, and kids shouted at full volume, would stay warm in your mind for a long, long time. And that, you thought, is the magic only humans can make. That night was suspiciously quiet. The wind had calmed, the fire burned low. You were just about to doze off when, scratch, scratch. A sound so familiar by now you didn't even flinch. Quick, tiny footsteps, full of confidence, uninvited guests, rats. Not one, not two, but an entire miniature marching band holding an all-you-can-eat buffet in your kitchen. In the darkness, you heard the gnawing, the faint squeaks, and your father groaning, "Again?" Rats were the involuntary roommates of every peasant family. It didn't matter how poor you were, they came anyway. It was as if they believed, if someone's surviving the winter here, there must be food. And you couldn't even blame them, because honestly, you were fighting them for the same scraps. They'd raid the kitchen, chew through the flour sack, nibble at the potato basket, and sometimes chew on your pillow. You tried to put on your shoe once, only to find a rat sleeping inside. You sighed, lifted the shoe, tapped it gently, and waited like someone waiting for their roommate to finish using the bathroom. You often thought that if rats could talk, you'd be close friends. You were both cold, hungry, and living in a damp straw hut. The only real difference? You didn't chew on socks. But of course, the problem wasn't just the noise or the missing potatoes. Rats carried what the villagers ominously called the bad breath sickness, meaning infectious disease, sometimes deadly. No one used the term plague, because no one knew it yet. They knew that the rats would somehow be involved if someone in the house got a fever, broke out in sores, and went silent. As we know, fleas on rats bite people and spread Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the Black Death. But in your time, people blamed bad air, strange winds, or maybe just last night's creepy moonlight. Some believed rats were witches in disguise, and witches were notoriously good at sneaking into rice jars. Your family had an entire arsenal of rat-repelling techniques. Ashes around the cooking pot, garlic at the doors, bowls of onion water in the corners. One night, your mother stuffed thyme into a crack in the wall, convinced that rats hated cleanliness. They didn't. One sniff, one shrug, and they went right on rummaging. Your grandmother believed in magic. Every night she whispered, "Protector of potatoes, keep us safe," then tapped the ceiling beam 3 times. She swore it worked. But in truth, you had just started hiding potatoes up your sleeve. The remedies of the day were interesting. One time, when you had a bad cough, your mother placed a roasted onion on your chest and told you not to move. It was hot, slimy, and smelled like unfinished soup. Another time, when you had a fever, your grandma made you hold a clove of garlic in your mouth, causing you to sneeze so violently that the illness seemingly forgot to return. Every household had its cure. Someone chewed willow bark. Someone inhaled the smoke of charred rat skin. Don't ask. Someone lay still and whispered prayers, hoping for the best. But everyone knew. If you were too sick to say you were hungry, that was serious. You once witnessed a small outbreak. The whole village fell silent. No rooster crows, no crying babies. Everyone shut their doors, hung charms, and prayed. Houses with illness hung black cloths on their doors. You remember passing one, flickering candlelight inside, coughing sounds leaking out, and feeling colder than the winter wind. But like all things, the sickness passed. The living carried on. The lost were spoken of. And the rats, completely unfazed, continued their nightly jog across the yard. As much as you hated them, you must admit that rats were survivors. They lived through every winter, ate anything, and stayed fat enough to be still annoying. They were like tiny versions of people, stubborn, resourceful, and often downright rude. One night, you decided to fight back. You grabbed a shovel, banged it on a pot, and yelled, "Get out!" Silence. Then, louder chewing noises. It was as if they replied, "No." You sighed, climbed into bed, pulled your blanket up to your ears, and whispered, "Just don't bite my ear, please." The next morning, your mother shouted, "The potatoes are untouched." Everyone rejoiced. You checked again. You'd forgotten the pot of potatoes outside in the goat shed. The rats hadn't found it. But your family still considered it a victory. You never managed to eliminate the rats, but you learned to live with them, as part of winter itself. And every morning, when you woke up with all your toes intact and your rice bowl unchewed, you smiled quietly and thought, "Today is a good day." This morning, you woke up to the most terrifying sound of winter, howling wind. Not the gentle, lulling kind. No, this was the kind that screamed in gusts as if the sky was grumbling because someone left the window to hell wide open. You knew you had to go outside even though every cell in your body said don't. Maybe to fetch water, check on the chickens, or gather firewood. You were wildly underprepared for whatever the task meant, heading into a battle with nature. You started layering up. Wool tunic, overcoat, scarf, hat, gloves, socks, layer after layer until you couldn't bend your elbows. You looked less like a person and more like a burlap-wrapped potato. With every step, you made a swish sound like a pile of dry leaves learning to walk. You opened the door. A wall of wind slapped you in the face, forcing you back half a step. Your eyes stung. Your nose began to freeze. And you were pretty sure that your eyebrows had just crystallized. Everything outside was gray. The sky and the ground blurred together in a soupy, frozen smear. Trees hunched like heaven was punishing them. The hens huddled in the coop, wearing the same expression as you. "Please let me call in sick." You nodded. "Me too." You yanked your hood lower, wrapped the scarf tighter, and began the great journey to the woodpile. It was only about 15 steps from the door, but in those 15 steps, you battled knee-deep snow, wind that slapped like a wet towel, and a sharp chill that made you question whether you still had ears. Every step was a balancing act. You slipped, sank, stumbled, and cursed the ancestor who invented the phrase, "Go get firewood." Inside your head, you screamed, "I could have been a baker, or a monk, or a cat." You reached the woodpile. The logs were frozen. Your hands were numb. You managed to grab an armful, heavy as sin, and turned around. The wind hit you again like it was saying, "Trying to go home? Think again." You exhaled and watched your breath freeze into a tiny cloud that flew back into your nose. Wonderful. On the way back, you fell into a snowdrift. Not deep, just enough for the snow to pour into your boots. You let out a silent scream, lips too cold to move. You glanced around, hoping no one saw. But the goat, Greta, was watching from the doorway with a look that clearly said, "Called it." You kicked the door open, dropped the firewood like a war trophy, and collapsed onto the floor as if returning from the Arctic. The family nodded with admiration. Your dad asked calmly, "Is it dry?" You glared at him. You were too frozen to reply. You stretched your feet toward the fire, slowly regaining sensation in your toes. They prickled with pain, like 100 tiny needles stabbing at once. A feeling you dubbed the pain of still being alive. In the Middle Ages, going outside in winter was always a gamble. People got lost in snowstorms, mere steps from home. Some sat to rest and never got back up. Some chased after blown-off hats and ended up losing their way. That's why you learned to tie a rope around your waist in the door, like a survival leash. You remembered a story from the village elder. Back in the day, winter markets were traveled like ants in a line, hand in hand, so no one got lost. You figured your house would need to tether the goat, the chickens, and probably the soup pot too, because no one wanted to leave anything behind in a storm. One time, you forgot to latch the barn door. In the morning, the cow was gone. Panic ensued. She had just wandered to the back of the house, leaning against the windbreak wall and looking as relaxed as a tourist on holiday. You scolded her. She mooed softly like, "Calm down, drama queen." And slipping? Oh, that was just part of the routine. You once slipped and landed in a water bucket, soaked, freezing, and mocked by your younger sibling for 3 days straight. But hey, at least you didn't fall into cow dung, like the neighbor. As evening fell, the wind howled, snow still fell, but you were in one piece, slightly red-faced, a bit frost-nipped, and possibly missing feeling in one toenail. But you had gathered the wood, and in this world, that was glory. You sprawled on the floor, cloaked in your heavy coat, letting the crackling fire lull you to sleep. Outside, the wind shrieked, but in here, you were warm. And tomorrow, whether the storm howls again or the snow gets deeper, you'll go out again. You'll grumble, stomp, maybe fall, but you'll survive, like you always do. Everything was white. So white that you couldn't tell if you were staring at the sky, the ground, or the side of your own house. A giant sheet of snow had swallowed the world whole. And there you were, squinting in the middle of it like a confused onion, debating whether to turn back. You'd only gone out for a straightforward reason, to fetch a loaf of bread your mother had sent to your grandmother's house next door, a short trip, barely 100 steps. And yet, 10 minutes had passed. Your legs were buried in snow, and you had no idea if you were heading in the right direction. Every familiar landmark had disappeared. The fence, gone. The apple tree, gone. The chicken trap pit, it's also gone, and you almost fell into it again. Everything was white. So white that you couldn't tell if you were staring at the sky, the ground, or the side of your own house. A giant sheet of snow had swallowed the world whole, and there you were, squinting in the middle of it like a confused onion, debating whether to turn back. You'd only gone out for a straightforward reason, to fetch a loaf of bread your mother had sent to your grandmother's house next door. A short trip, barely 100 steps. And yet, 10 minutes had passed. Your legs were buried in snow, and you had no idea if you were heading in the right direction. Every familiar landmark had disappeared. The fence? Gone. The apple tree? Gone. The chicken trap pit? It's also gone. And you almost fell into it again. The wind refused to rest, and each step was a duel against the cold that snaked from your feet up your spine. You tried to follow tracks, Greta's tracks to be exact. Big mistake. They led you in a perfect circle. You had just followed a goat in a snowstorm. That's not a story you tell with pride. You stopped, trying to get your bearings, but all you saw was white, and all you heard was wind. You started thinking, if I turn back, which way is back? You turned in one direction. Wrong. I tried another. Worse. Finally, you resorted to the only option, yelling, "Grandma, where's the bread?" No answer. Maybe she didn't hear you. Or perhaps you were now 50 steps away in the exact opposite direction. Your face began to go numb. Your nose felt frozen solid. Your ears seemed to disappear. You rubbed your face. It was like touching chilled stone. You tried to take a deep breath, but the air stabbed at your lungs like ice needles. Panic began to creep in. Your head spun. The soles of your feet tingled. You'd heard the stories. People who collapsed from disorientation steps from home. People who never came back. Winter didn't need to drag you far. It just required you to lose direction. Back then, people tied ropes from their doors to the barn, or to the well, or to the neighbor's house. Not for hanging laundry, but to avoid getting lost in the blinding snow fog. You thought about that now and cursed yourself. Why didn't I tie a rope today? You dropped to a crouch to catch your breath. Bad idea. The snow rushed up and bit your backside when you sat down. Your thighs froze. You sprang back up like a startled rabbit and shouted louder. "Anybody? Got any bread?" And then, miraculously, you caught a scent. Faint. Warm. Familiar. Turnip soup. No, more specifically, slightly burned turnip soup. Your home's signature scent. Smoky. Sharp. With a whiff of desperation. Pure comfort. You turned toward the smell. You weren't certain, but you hoped. Step by step, you sniffed the air like a little tracking hound, your breath guiding you back to the homeland of scorched broth. And then, like a ghost emerging from a blizzard, you saw the faint outline of a roof. Not clear, but enough for your heart to scream, "There!" You ran toward the house and waddled and stumbled like a snowman with bad knees. You smacked your hands against the wooden door. It opened. Your mother, holding a spoon, appeared half worried and half annoyed. "Where's the bread?" You gasped, lips trembling, nose flushed red, and whispered, "I followed Greta." Everyone looked at you like you just returned from the edge of the earth. You didn't care. You were alive. And the snow, the blind blank enemy, hadn't beaten you. Not today. You peeled off your soggy clothes, parked near the fire, sipped a bowl of that burned soup. Yes, very burned, and felt the blood return to your fingers. Your sibling muttered, "You look like a washed potato." You nodded. "At least I'm a potato. Not a popsicle." The lesson of the day? Winter doesn't need traps. It doesn't need to roar. It just needs to be white and cold and nudge you slightly off course. But you made it back. No bread. Misled by goat prints. Face half frozen, but back nonetheless. Thanks to instincts, the smell of burned soup, and sheer determination not to be the kid who got lost in their own backyard. Arid reason. To fetch a loaf of bread your mother had sent to your grandmother's house next door. A short trip. Barely 100 steps. And yet, 10 minutes had passed. Your legs were buried in snow, and you had no idea if you were heading in the right direction. Every familiar landmark had disappeared. The fence? Gone. The apple tree? Gone. The chicken trap pit? It's also gone, and you almost fell into it again. Do you know the feeling when your hands stop being hands? When you look down and they're red, cracked, burning, and you start to wonder whether you've grown 2 slabs of raw meat instead of fingers? Welcome to medieval winter, where your hands are always the first to suffer. You do everything with them. Carry water, chop wood, stir pots, lace boots, scratch your head. But it's so cold that even gripping something solid feels like your fingers might snap off. You've wrapped them in straw, swaddled them in cloth, and even once tried stuffing them into a bag of flour. Big mistake. You later baked the bag just to avoid wasting it. Every morning, you wake up with fingers as stiff as dead twigs. You try to flex them. Crack. Not broken. Just your body filing a formal complaint. You once tried making gloves out of old socks. It worked. Until a mouse chewed off the middle finger. You also considered using stale bread. Until you remembered. Greta had licked half the loaf yesterday. Idea abandoned. But the work doesn't stop. You haul water. Your hand freezes mid-lift. The water spills, and immediately turns to ice at the bucket's rim. You chop wood. The axe slips from your grip because of the frost. You stir the pot. Your wooden spoon fuses to your hand. Sometimes, you must breathe onto your palms like you're trying to resuscitate 2 frozen pebbles. Your father's hands are the same. Cracked, scabbed, peeling like bark. Your mother rubs pig fat on hers every night. It soothes the cracks and makes you think of stew. She calls it survival cream. You call it meat-scented hand balm. You've lost sensation in your fingers, but not pain. The pain is still there. Tying rope, fastening buttons, weaving nets, every task is a battle of endurance. You once spent 15 minutes trying to button a single coat toggle. When you finally managed, it felt like you'd slain a personal demon. Touching other people becomes difficult. Not because of the cold, but because of fear. Everyone's hands hurt. A pat on the back makes people flinch. A handshake is a luxury reserved for emergencies. You live with family, yet sometimes it feels distant, because no one wants to touch anyone. You once tried to pray with your hands clasped. Too cold. So you settled for closing your eyes and muttering in your head, "Dear Lord, please don't let my fingers snap off when I carry water. Amen." In your village, people say soft hands are a sign of blessing. You look at your own. Rough, cracked, practically screaming, "Not chosen." One day, you got a blister from gripping the axe handle too long. It popped, leaked, and scabbed over. So cold you didn't feel the pain. Only regret. That wound might not heal until spring. You remember one night more vividly than the rest. The wind whispered outside. The fire inside crackled low. You sat silently in a corner, your hands trembling, saying nothing. Your mother came over. She didn't say a word either. She just held your hand, hers rough and cracked too, but still warm. That warmth didn't come from heat. It came from care. One hand touching another, not out of need or duty, but to share a feeling. I know. You're tired. So am I. You held on, not tightly, because both of you hurt. But you smiled. No words were needed. After that night, you and your siblings started tapping hands gently before bed. Just once. Just enough to remind each other that you're still here no matter how cold it gets, and not alone. You look at your hands now. Ugly, cracked, sooty, calloused. But you tell yourself, they still work. They still feel. They still mean I'm alive. And sometimes, that's all you need. You open the pantry door with the faintest glimmer of hope. Is there anything to eat? You're not asking for much. A vegetable that still resembles a vegetable. A scrap of dry bread that hasn't gone green. A piece of cheese. Well, even if it's starting to walk on its own, you'd consider it. Instead, you're greeted by a museum of what survived endless winters. Withered turnips, a sack of barley that smells like fermented hay, and a jug of sour ale so far gone it could double as a floor cleaner. The scent inside is a pungent cocktail of smoke, old sweat, and dashed dreams. You stand there emotionless. This isn't a pantry. This is a survival exhibit. You try playing a game. Pantry roulette. Reach in unquestioningly, pull something out, and guess. Edible, but we'll regret it. Or eat and meet your ancestors. Today's lucky item? A shriveled red onion, dry but fragrant. Victory. You reach for a cloth bag in the corner. Dried beans, hard as pebbles. You could always throw them at wolves if you can't cook them. But beans mean a meal, even if they take 3 hours to soften and chew like boiled leather. You gather a few more ingredients. A rat-nibbled dried turnip, a pinch of salt, and a chunk of something that might be a mushroom, or a vintage piece of mold. You sniff. Mistake. It smells like goat fur and regret. Eliminated. You dump everything that might be food into a pot. Add water, a splash of fermented fish sauce. It twitched a little, but that's normal. And begin the simmering ritual. You don't call this cooking. You call it negotiating with fate. While you wait, your mother once said, "Back in the day, I made soup with onion skins, chicken bones, and sheer optimism." You realize you've recreated her exact recipe. You toss a tiny potato, boil it soft, and mash it for texture. When the special soup begins to bubble, a smell rises. Not delicious, but warm. You call the family. Your sibling peers into the pot and whispers, "What is this?" You answer, "It's cooked hope." In the Middle Ages, having a full pantry is a blessing. People dried turnips, strung onions, buried roots, and brewed beer. The salt was white gold. Vinegar was your food insurance. And anything not moldy, a feast. The problem is, no fridge, no airtight containers. There are no expiration dates, just intuition. You sniff, you guess, you pray, and sometimes you take a bite, then wait for your stomach to confirm whether it was a terrible idea. You once baked bread with dough that had fermented for 2 weeks. It came out flatter than a sandal, but everyone split it. Each person got a fingernail-sized piece. Your sibling called it air loaf. Occasionally, miracles happen. One day, you dug through the back and found an old jar of honey hidden by your mother. Still golden, still fragrant. The whole family gathered around, dipped their fingers in, and tasted it like sunshine. You drizzled a little into the watery porridge, and the food was lovely for the first time in days. Your sibling jumped up, shouting, "Dessert!" Everyone laughed. Your father wiped his eyes, either from emotion or smoke. You've learned not every meal is good, but any meal can be memorable if you season it with laughter, a game, and a little made-up magic around the table. Some nights you say, "Tonight's stew is enchanted. Whoever eats it will dream sweet dreams." Your sibling asks, "Really?" You wink, "Only if you finish my share." You're no chef, but you're a pantry warrior. You know how to cook with things no one calls ingredients. You know how to set a table using items others would toss. And most of all, you always find something every time you open the pantry, even if it reeks of smoke and stale turnips. Not something delicious, but something that proves you're still trying to live. Night falls, and as the sun disappears, your house returns to its proper form. A cold box that creaks like it's complaining about its existence. You know it's time to crawl into bed, or rather, into the collection of fabric, straw, and desperate hope that you call a bed. The room offers no protection from the outside weather. Wind seeps through every crack, whispering, "Enjoy your winter sleep." You shiver, throw on a 4th layer, then a 5th, and wonder if you've worn more clothes than the number of compliments you've received in your entire life. You lie down. The straw mattress is stiff, like underbaked hardtack. Your back protests. But the worst part? That icy sheet brushing against your bare legs. It's cold, sudden, and somehow feels like betrayal. You yelp softly, "Ah!" and yank your feet back like you just touched the soul of winter. You curl up like a sad cinnamon roll. There's no pillow, just a folded old shirt. And if you're lucky, you won't be next to your siblings' frozen feet tonight. The whole family sleeps in one room, for warmth. Your parents are on one side. You, your siblings, sometimes the cat, and occasionally a curious chicken, on the other. One night, even Greta the goat decided to share the warmth. You woke up with a goat leg on your face. There's no fireplace in the bedroom. The kitchen fire has gone out. Cold creeps in from the dirt floor, the wooden walls, and the straw roof. You swear you once saw your breath freeze in midair. Not scientifically, just emotionally. You listen to the family's breathing, software rhythmic. There's a groan from your dad, probably his back, a grinding sound from your sister's teeth. The cat wheezes, and someone is pulling the blanket. You open your eyes. Half your blanket is gone. The other half now resides with your younger brother. You whisper, "Give it back." He doesn't. You tug. He resists. You're locked in a silent battle of wills, mediated by a thin, itchy blanket. Eventually, you let go. You sigh. "I've got my third pair of socks. I'll survive," you tell yourself. Every night is a drama. Who sleeps in the middle? Who's stuck by the wall? Drafty. Who gets the cat? Warm but furry. You once argued with your sister because she threw her leg too hard. Your mom has also scolded you for snoring like a town drum. History says people used to sleep close together for warmth. True, but it never mentions the kicking, the blanket stealing, and the constant midnight turf wars. Some call it the warmth of community. You call it nighttime wrestling. One time you dreamt you were floating in a warm spring. You smiled. Then I woke up. The cat had peed on the blanket. You weren't smiling anymore. Winter nights are long. It gets dark in the afternoon. You lie there, unable to sleep, staring up at the roof, where moonlight streams through a few suspicious holes. You think about bread. You think about summer. You wonder what if snow blocks the door tomorrow. You're not scared, just tired and cold. You've tried counting sheep, but even the imaginary sheep are shivering and asking for a blanket. So you give up. Some nights, you hear a creak. Not a mouse, not the cat. It's the door rattling in the wind. You pull the blanket up to your nose. You're not afraid of ghosts. You're worried someone will ask you to check the chicken coop at 2 a.m. Then, just as you feel you can't take it anymore, your eyes close. Not because you're warm, but because you're too tired to care. Your body gives in. Your mind drifts. Sleep comes. Not pretty. Not long. But enough. In the morning you wake up. Your nose is cold. Your eyes sting. Your eyebrows have a thin layer of frost. You wipe it off. It feels like dusting your face. You stretch, crackle, stiff. But you get up. You survived another night. You look around. The family's still asleep. Your brother's hand is hugging your leg. The cat is lounging on your head. And the blanket is finally on your side. You smile. A small midnight victory. You know tonight will be cold again. But now you also know. You've adapted. You can take it. And you'll sleep again as long as there's someone next to you. A cat in your ear. And at least a sliver of blanket left to fight for. Even if it's through shivers. Everything was cozy. You were curled up beneath layers of blankets, head resting on a folded shirt, the faint crackle of dying embers whispering in the distance. You were beginning to dream, not of anything specific, but not of cold. And then your body sent a signal. Hey, you've got to go. You opened your eyes, lips dry, feet numb, heart full of regret. Not now. Not in the middle of the night. Not when the air outside could turn breath into icicles. You tried bargaining. Can it wait until morning? Your bladder replied, absolutely not. You sat up like a reluctant zombie, creeping around in search of your boots, only to find one had been kicked under the bed, possibly by your sibling or the cat. You shoved your foot into a cold boot, each step feeling like walking on stale embers. Fumbling for your cloak, you opened the door. The night wind slapped your face with all the mercy of a wet plank. It was so cold that you could feel your brain shrink like a raisin dropped in snowmelt. But out you went because you were a warrior. And also, frankly, out of options. The path to the outhouse wasn't far. But in this frost-bitten darkness, it felt like a spiritual journey. Mud had frozen, snow piled high, and the wind lashed your face like it held a grudge. Every step was a negotiation. Do I really have to go? Really? Really? You tripped over something soft. Greta, the goat, sleeping at the door. She made a sound somewhere between a fart and a sigh. You whispered apologies. She glared like you'd just shattered her one good dream. Your hands trembled as you reached for the outhouse latch. It was frozen solid. You shoulder-rammed it open, and the wind burst inside like it had urgent business. You stepped into pitch blackness. No candle. Rookie mistake. The familiar outhouse aroma greeted you, earthy, fermented, and somehow judgmental. You sat down. The wooden seat was as warm and welcoming as the moon's surface. Regret was immediate. No toilet paper, only dry straw, unforgiving, suspiciously stiff, and possibly mouse-infested. You finished your business in a pose that would be studied centuries later as the coldest human squat. In that moment, you felt like the most vulnerable creature on Earth. In the dark, in the snow, seated on a freezing plank, whispering prayers like, "Please let nothing crawl up my leg." You stood up, slowly, feet half frozen, knees doubtful. You pushed the door open, tilted your head, and saw nothing. Snow had erased the path. The wind howled louder. No light. No tracks. You spun around 3 times and promptly lost all sense of direction. You picked a random heading, took a few steps, and smacked your forehead into the chicken coop. The chickens clucked in protest. You apologized again. Backed up. This time, you tried to follow the scent of wood smoke. Warmth had to be somewhere. You moved faster. Slipped. Fell flat in the snow. It didn't hurt. You were too cold to register pain. You just lay there, staring at the sky, exhaling foggy puffs, thinking, "This is how my legacy ends. A frozen trail and a full bladder's revenge." But then you rolled over, pushed yourself up, and wobbled forward like a squid slapped by the wind. Finally, you saw a faint glow peeking through the door frame. Home. Sanctuary. The land of blankets, though frequently contested. You slipped inside. Your mother snored softly. Your sibling murmured something and turned over. The cat opened one eye, blinked, and returned to sleep. You crawled under the covers, kicked off your boots, and curled like a dried fish dropped in warm broth. You didn't feel warm, but you did feel at peace. You had just survived one of the oldest trials in the peasant's handbook, getting up in the dead of night to face darkness, frostbite, and an outhouse. You whispered to the ceiling, "Ever again, until tomorrow night." You wake up, pull the straw blanket off your face, rub your eyes, and immediately sense something different. The house is already abuzz with whispers. Voices call out from the yard. Then your mother announces, loud and clear, "The river's frozen. There's a frost fair today." You spring up, half your body is still numb, but your heart is racing. The frost fair, something you've heard about in passing, half dream, half myth, is absolute. The river has turned into a stage, a marketplace on ice. It sounds ridiculous and magical, like someone combined figure skating and vegetable sales. You dress in every layer you own, wrap a scarf around your head, and march with your family down to the river. The scene that unfolds before you is breathtaking. The surface of the river is flat, white, and alive with people, as if winter itself had thrown a party. Vendors set up stalls, hot soup, stiff jams, bread as dense as bricks. Others dance, slide, and hop around on homemade skates. One man even tosses a goose in the air and catches it barehanded, like a medieval street circus. An old man selling rock-hard cakes yells, "One bite, warm for 3 hours." You don't believe him, but try one anyway. Then discover it's warm, all right? Because it's filled with mustard so spicy it nearly reboots your brain. Your sibling takes a bite, tears running down their face, muttering, "Delicious," in a painful way. You slip once, don't fall, but windmill your arms dramatically. A nearby old lady compliments your graceful leap, and you feel a moment of pride, until you realize she's severely nearsighted. A fiddle player grabs your arm and shouts, "Dance with us." You decline politely but get swept into the crowd anyway. You don't know the steps, but you stomp, twist, wiggle your hips, and laugh loud enough to forget your feet are frozen. There's something warm in the air, not in temperature, but in spirit. Everyone's cold, everyone's hungry. But today, they've all agreed to pause that, laugh, play, and live a little louder. And yes, the frost fair was real. When the River Thames froze solid in the 17th and 18th centuries, Londoners threw frost fairs, with shops, games, and even books printed on the ice. Villagers from miles around came as the river had become the most famous carnival in town. You spot a man trying to write his name in wine across the ice. Before the letters dry, he slips and wipes it out with his backside. A little girl selling roasted turnips shouts, "Buy one, get lucky all year." Your dad buys 3, for luck in bulk. You try a beanbag toss game, hit a tin can, and win a cheese cube the size of your fingernail. You treasure it like gold. Your mom sees you grinning and shakes her head. Big kid. Tiny prize. Nearby, people make music with spoons, frying pans, and even pot lids. It's loud, messy, chaotic, and everyone claps along. An older woman stands on a crate, tells ghost stories in broad daylight, and somehow still manages to creep you out. Then crack. A tiny sound, but sharp enough to silence the crowd. The ice groans. A thin crack slithers across the surface like a warning. Everyone looks at each other. Then, calmly but briskly, the retreat begins. The music stops. The goose flies. Someone yells, "Party's over." You grab your sibling's hand and run, not daring to look back. The ice still holds for now. But everyone knows, a frost fair is a gift, and all gifts expire. Back home, you burst through the door, breath heavy, cheeks red, boots soaked. Your mother hands you a towel. Your father hands you the lucky turnips. The family gathers close, retelling the day's events like reciting the best dream they've ever shared. You curl into the corner, close your eyes, and smile. For just one day, it felt like winter didn't exist. Like the cold had been banished by music, laughter, and mustard-burnt pastries. And that was enough. One morning, you sit by the fireplace, if you can call that dying pile of embers a fireplace, and suddenly catch a scent that feels oddly familiar. You lean down, sniff your shirt, and recoil. It smells like a pot of soup forgotten for 3 days, blended with wet goat fur and a hint of expired fighting spirit. That's when it hits you. It's been too long since you last did laundry. Truth is, everyone in the village smells this way. The scent of winter is a cocktail of smoke, lard, mildew, and sweat marinated in layers of wool. People glance at each other, wrinkle their noses, then pretend not to notice. Because everyone is, technically, flammable. You do the unthinkable. Wash clothes in winter. A task worthy of a medal. Or at least a folk song honoring your bravery. You gather the stiff-as-boards clothing, pile them into a basket, and drag it out like a burden from Greek mythology, straight to the nearby stream. The problem is, the stream is nearly frozen. You have to crack open a sheet of ice to reach a trickle of water. When you dip your hands in, it feels like plunging them into a bucket of frozen needles. You let out a soft scream, "Ah!" and then sensibly convince yourself, cold hands, warm heart. You start scrubbing. Shirts, pants, rags. There's no real soap, just some ash mixed with water. A solution best described as having the scent of hope. You try to scrub a wool tunic, thick fabric, stubborn dirt, and a pair of hands that no longer feel like yours. You use a rock to beat dust out of a collar at one point. At another, you step on a rag to wring it out. And at some point, truly, you begin to question, what if I just gave up on clothing entirely? But you persist. A growing pile of soggy garments builds up beside you, heavy as generational trauma. You lug it toward the clothesline, strung between 2 trembling dead trees, where the breeze makes it sway like it's mourning its fate. You hang each item. Within minutes, your laundry begins to freeze. Shirts stiffen like stale crackers. Socks stand upright. Pants, no joke, harden into a sculpture resembling someone's mid-folk dance. You look at them, equal parts amused and devastated. If someone painted this scene, they could call it Frozen Fashion 1347. In medieval times, laundry was grueling, especially in winter. The water was so cold that people scrubbed their clothes with ashes or sand. Women often did it in groups, washing while gossiping and shivering. Wealthier households might have indoor water barrels, but the stream is already a luxury for you. You once heard of an old village lady who dropped her handkerchief in the stream. When she reached to retrieve it, her hand froze to the rock. Her family had to rescue her, and she later abandoned the handkerchief entirely. You understand? Deeply. The clothes hang all day. They don't dry. They change from wet to frozen. You gather them by nightfall, stiff, icy, and making soft clonk sounds. You cradle them like armor forged from winter itself. Back home, you huddle near the hearth, hands cold and numb, hovering over the fire. Your mother looks at you like a soldier returned from the front lines. She nods. You nod back. No words are needed. After hours by the fire, the clothes soften slightly. You pull on a clean shirt. It feels fresh, somewhat damp, but undeniably cleaner. At the very least, it no longer smells like 3-day goat stew. You lie in bed, wrapped in recently washed fabric, equal parts comforted and chilled. Cleanliness in the Middle Ages doesn't smell good. It just smells less harmful. But it represents effort, a small victory in the never-ending winter war. You close your eyes and whisper, "Next time, I'll do laundry sooner." No one believes that. Not even you. Ban wakes up with a head heavy as a cast-iron pan, a throat that feels like it swallowed a thistle bush, and a body that aches as Greta kicks you from all angles. You groan softly and lie still like an undercooked dumpling. The whole family gathers around with grave expressions. Your mother whispers, "It's got him." No one says exactly what has got you because in the Middle Ages, there was no precise word for the flu. Just the vague and ominous. Illness. And illness usually means trouble. You're hot, then cold, then hot again. Sweat pours down, but your hands and feet feel like ice. You're wrapped in 3 blankets, a straw coat, and, thanks to Grandma's wisdom, a handkerchief soaked in onion juice slapped across your forehead. The smell defies polite description. Your sibling panics and runs to pick garlic. A few moments later, you're forced to chew a raw clove. It burns like your mouth just kissed the devil's armpit. Your dad searches for licorice root, but comes back with turnip root. You drink it anyway. You're served a mysterious tea of dried chamomile, mint leaves, a chunk of charcoal, and a whispered prayer. Your mom calls it illness banish tea. You call it floor cleaner, steeped. Every time you cough, Grandma nods wisely. Good. That's the bad air leaving. You cough so hard you nearly eject your belief in folk medicine out the window. In medieval times, peasants trusted herbs because they had nothing else. No doctors, no pills, no Google. Only word of mouth and a pinch of superstition. A fever? Cold air seeped into your bones. Nausea? The moons tilted wrong. Some hung wolf teeth on doorways. Others tied red threads around their wrists. You must wear a small pouch containing garlic, mint, salt, and a splinter of sacred wood. Every time you move, it emits a scent, not unlike soup left in the sun. Your sibling lights incense and waves it around your face. You lie still, eyes closed, wondering, is this healing or mummification? The peak of the madness comes when your dad brews the resurrection broth. Old chicken bones, mystery roots, onion peel, a tuft of goat hair, and sheer spiritual optimism. One sip, your whole body jolts, not from recovery, from shock. You sit up gasping, "I'm fine, really." But you're not fine. You're finished with the smoke cure onion wrap surprise broth method. That night, your fever spikes. Your pillow is soaked, your mind spins. You drift into dreams, if they can be called that. You walk through a sunlit summer field, chasing a jam-filled pastry that keeps floating away. You trip, fall, and wake up hugging the house cat. Grandma says, "This is good." Dreaming of food means you're getting better. You're not sure if she's right. But by morning, your throat burns less. Your eyes don't blur. And For the first time in days, you feel hungry. You're fed thin, lightly salted porridge with a single spoonful of honey, a luxury greater than gold in this house. Your family cheers like you've returned from the dead. Your sibling vows never to steal your blanket again. They say this every time you're sick. Your dad sneaks you an extra piece of stale bread because you survived. You don't fully recover in a day, but you start to move again, to walk. And whenever someone asks, "How are you feeling?" you answer, "Still alive." It sounds small, but it means everything. You glance at the garlic, the herbs, the onion cloth, the stinky pouch, and it all seems ridiculous. And yet you feel grateful, because in an age with no medicine, no doctors, and nothing but love, guesswork, and a bit of reckless hope, your family did everything they could to keep you here. And sometimes, that's enough. There are days when you wake up, and from the very first second, you know that this will be a bad day. That morning, you're jolted awake by your mother yelling, "The fire's out!" And sure enough, the embers are dead, the hearth stone cold. You rush outside and immediately slip on the icy doorstep, a promising start. You stumble to the well to fetch water, but it's frozen over. You smash at the ice with your bucket, only for the bucket to break. You stare at the shattered pail, then at the sky, and murmur, "What day is it again?" Your father struggles to stack firewood, only to discover the missing axe. Your little sibling is crying because the goat ate their only pair of decent gloves. And the chicken, the one that still lays eggs, refuses to leave the coop, presumably because it's too cold to live with dignity. You try to start a fire, wood's damp. You try straw, it smokes and chokes. After 3 failed attempts, you're left holding your head, muttering, "I think I've been cursed." You open the grain sack, only to find a hole chewed through. Something, or someone, had a midnight feast. Grains are scattered across the floor. The cat lounges nearby, putting on its best not my problem face. You sweep up the rice like you're collecting the last crumbs of hope. With no water, you decide to make soup from melted snow. Romantic in theory, disaster in practice. The snow water soup smells like wet wool left out in the sun. But you still toss in some vegetables, let it simmer, and then completely forget about it. Smoke rises. A burnt stench hits your eyes. You scream, "No!" and scramble to save the pot. In the chaos, you trip over the cat and spill the soup across the floor. It scorches your leg, it stinks, and you're mortified. You collapse on the floor, not angry. I did not panic and was just done. Your brain stops thinking. No more frustration, no more fights. Just a single feeling, exhausted disappointment. You look at your family. Everyone operates in survival mode. Mom's holding her head, Dad's scratching his chin. Your sibling is sobbing over a rock-hard piece of bread they didn't get to eat. The goat is chewing on the doormat. In the Middle Ages, days like this happened often. No day off, no plan B. Everything depended on the weather, luck, and the mood of the poultry. If the fire died, you froze. If water iced over, you went thirsty. If the goat ate your gloves, you just dealt with it. You drag yourself to the kitchen corner and pick up a chunk of stale bread, so hard it could tap out a rhythm. You gnaw it like punishment. Dad sighs, then starts chopping kindling with a paring knife. Mom gathers sawdust to dry. Your sibling, still sniffling, carefully refluffs the chicken's straw nest. You glance at everyone, busy, quiet, exhausted. Then, out of nowhere, your sibling mutters, "At least the goat didn't pee on the bed today." Everyone pauses, then chuckles, then laughs. Quietly at first, then louder, until the room echoes with ridiculous, exhausted, cathartic laughter. Not because things are better, but because if you don't laugh, you'll probably cry. You lean against the wall, laughing with them. Things are still bad. The soup's gone, your legs are frozen, and the rice is mostly gone. But the sound of laughter makes everything feel a little lighter. Somehow you manage to get the fire going again, through some miracle or stubbornness. The whole family gathers around the hearth, slurping thin porridge. Not tasty, but warm. Dad tells a story about how he once dropped an entire bowl of batter on Mom's head. She laughed about it for a week. Mom shares how she once tried to wash laundry in rainwater mixed with mud. She thought it was natural soap. The stories continue. The fire crackles. Your sibling falls asleep on your shoulder. The cat curls under the stool. You sigh, gaze into the flickering embers, and think, surviving a bad day is a win. Not every day is a success. But if you're still here, still smiling, and still surrounded by your people, then even the worst days can end, okay? And if tomorrow's just as bad, you'll deal with it. With a new bucket, and maybe a pair of gloves hidden from Greta. Tonight is unusually quiet. The wind outside has softened to a gentle whisper. No snow falls, or at least none you can hear. The chores are done. The fire burns low, only a faint red glow among the coals. And at the center of the wooden table lies the most precious thing left in the house. A single candle. It's not a fancy one. Not perfumed, not pretty. It's just a lopsided, half-melted stub that's already been burned unevenly. But when lit, it gives off a strangely soothing glow. Everyone sits around it, not speaking loudly. Just quiet, gentle, and oddly enough, warmer than any woolen blanket could ever be. You watch your shadow dance on the wall, flickering like it's got a mind of its own. The candlelight turns everyone's cheeks pink and their eyes glassy. Not from emotion, but from reflection. Your father shares a story of when he got lost in a blizzard and found his way back thanks to a barking dog. Your mother reminisces about her first attempt at baking bread. When she added too much flour, the dough puffed up like a hat and exploded in the oven, convincing the whole village there was a ghost. Your little sibling laughs so hard they nearly spit out their half-chewed dried turnip. You toss a few more sticks onto the fire, just enough to keep the embers alive. Then, no one's sure who starts telling a ghost story. The voice drops low, half covered by a scarf, one hand raised like it's conjuring spirits. You shiver a little, not out of fear, but because the goat Greta sneezes by the door right then. Loud, wet, with feeling. The entire family jumps. Someone screams, someone else giggles in sheer panic. Your sibling falls off their chair. You slam your hand on the table and laugh so hard you nearly choke. Then, like the wind outside, everything settles again. The laughter alone is enough to warm the room by a few degrees. In the Middle Ages, nights were long and dark. No electricity. No oil lamps for people with low incomes. A single candle was a luxury. A bit of light and hope. People used candles to say prayers, to find their way to the latrine, to see each other's faces, and sometimes to remind themselves they were still here. You look at the candle. It wavers slightly in the draft, sneaking through the wall cracks, but it doesn't go out. Like your family, like you. Your mother speaks. Tonight, everyone says what they're hoping for come spring. One by one, they share. I hope we have eggs every day. I hope the bread doesn't go green. I hope the snow melts soon. Your father chuckles. I hope the goat stops eating people's stuff. You think for a moment. Then say, I hope for sunlight. Everyone nods. No one adds anything. No one needs to. The candle burns lower. Its light dims, but no one blows it out. Everyone watches, like that light is a delicate thread tying winter to memory, tying the family to this rare moment of stillness, of togetherness. You lean against your mother. Your sibling leans against you. The cat curls in your father's lap. No one speaks. No one has to. No clinking dishes. No smoky air. No whistling wind. Just the soft glow, steady breathing, and heartbeats slowing. Then the candle flickers, wavers. Your chest tightens just a little. But it doesn't go out, still glowing. You smile and close your eyes. The flame isn't big, but like your family's patience, it doesn't need to be bright. It just needs to last. You drift into sleep, gently, like a leaf falling onto fresh snow. No worry, no cold, no restlessness anymore. Just sleep, in the candlelight, in hope. One morning you wake up and know something has changed. Not by sight, but by sound. Drip, drip, drip. From the roof, from the branches, from the edge of the gutter. The snow is melting. You sit up straight and dash to the door. No boots. Bare feet on cold. No longer frozen earth. The air isn't sharp like a blade anymore. It's soft, damp, and it smells different. Like soil, like decaying grass, like old mushrooms and shy little plants stretching beneath the thawing mud. You inhale deeply, cough a little from the dust, then smile. Villagers also begin to emerge, squinting at the light, testing the ground beneath cautious feet. Voices call out between thatched rooftops. Your father says, "It's time." No one asks, "Time for what?" You all know it's time to begin again. The thaw isn't picturesque. It's mushy, dirty, and slippery like lard. You take one step, sink halfway down, another, and lose a shoe. Your cat steps outside, touches the ground, and immediately retreats, scandalized. But the chicken? It hops and flaps like it just discovered paradise. Greta the goat looks completely betrayed. She stands in the yard, staring at the mud like it's the worst personal offense. "Where's my soft white mattress?" her eyes seem to ask. Then she slips. You laugh. Then slip, too. Both of you lie there, steaming in the mud, wondering which of you is the bigger fool. No one's dry. Cloaks, dresses, scarves, all smeared and soaked. But no one complains. After weeks of being frozen stiff, everyone is more than willing to trade dignity for signs of life. Historically, this was the beginning of mud season, a miserable prelude to spring. But for medieval peasants, it was the signal to start everything: patch the roof, clean the pens, check the drainage, and most importantly, plant anything you can eat. You get to work. Clear out moldy straw from the goat pen. Respread drying hay across the yard. Chip away the last ice in the water jugs. You dig into the soft ground with your hands, looking for forgotten root vegetables from the fall. Your father climbs to check the roof. More thatch is missing than you thought. You're no longer frozen, just damp and tired. But a good kind of tired. The kind that says your body remembers how to work again. Your sibling skips around the yard, picking up dry sticks and singing something cheerful. Your mother hangs out the laundry. It dries for the first time in weeks instead of freezing stiff. Even the sound of the village changes. You hear hammers, sawing, children begging to go outside, chickens clucking, and glorious water trickling from gutters, roofs, and all the places you thought would be locked in ice forever. You sit on the step, shielding your eyes from the sun. Not summer sun, just a pale, bashful light, but still, sunlight. You look around. Your whole family, covered in mud, exhausted, elbow deep in chores, and all smiling. Not big grins, but small, steady smiles. You don't say it out loud, but inside, you think, "I survived." You remember nights curled in scratchy blankets, mornings without fire, and days when your breath froze in the air. You remember losing soup pots, washing clothes in freezing streams, and nearly crying over spilled food or broken tools. All of that is now past tense. It's not gone forever. Winter will return. But this time, you made it through. You look at your hands, cracked, calloused, and think, still capable. Still here. The cat jumps into your lap, muddy, wet, and vaguely smelling goat. You don't push it away. You hold it close even if it's damp and gross. Because warmth today isn't about dryness. It's about acceptance. You take one deep breath, and in the smell of mud, fur, and half-rotting turnips, you smell spring. The moment the last snow melted, your village became a construction site. Everything, and I mean everything, needed fixing. Cracked walls, leaky thatched roofs, a chicken coop that leaned like it was contemplating escape. The kitchen door creaked like it was sobbing, and the wooden floor, already a bit wobbly, now trembled like it was rehearsing a modern dance routine. Before you could eat breakfast, your mother had already assigned you 3 tasks: sweep the yard, scrub the mold off the walls, and fill in a mysterious hole someone, most likely the goat, had dug right outside the back door. Your sibling wandered around with a bucket, filled with dirty water and early spring joy. Your father was patching the roof on a ladder, shouting, "Bring me the pestle!" You called back, "Which pestle?" He yelled, "The one for hammering nails." You whispered to yourself, "That's called a hammer, Dad." Work dragged on from sunrise until you couldn't tell sweat from rain, or mud from lunch. You climbed the roof to patch holes with dry grass and rope bundles. At one point, you nearly slipped on a frog. You screamed. The frog leapt. Both of you were equally traumatized. The goat below left a bad like it was cheering for you. You scrubbed mold off the walls until your hands turned red. The smell was so musty it felt like your house had a soul, and that soul hated being cleaned. You sneezed. Once. Twice. Then again. Each sneeze rattled your brain like a gentle goat kick. The cat jumped off your lap. Your sibling said, "You sneeze like fireworks." You laughed, then sneezed again. Spring didn't just bring chores. It brought pollen, mold spores, and every airborne nuisance your nose could revolt against. You tried wrapping a cloth over your face. It didn't help. You tried chewing garlic. Still sneezed. You even stuffed mint leaves in your ears. Grandma's idea. The result, a persistent buzzing in your head all afternoon. You discovered the roof had a bigger hole than expected. The kitchen floorboards were rotting. And the final straw? One morning, you slid your foot into your boot and found a frog napping. You both stared at each other momentarily, then fled in opposite directions. Your dad joked, "A frog in the boot? That's a good sign. Means it's warming up." You weren't convinced, but agreed. Winter must be over if something willingly moves into your footwear. Every day became a patching, cleaning, fixing, scrubbing, and filling loop. You woke up smelling like mud, worked with sleeves covered in dust. I ate lunch beside moldy timber, and had dinner to the background music of coughing and sneezing echoing through the house. But there was something in the air that made it all feel hopeless. Just busy, alive. Birds chirped, breezes stirred, sunlight slipped through the rafters, and everything you did, scraping moss, sealing leaks, felt like it mattered. You cleaned the chicken coop and found a fresh clutch of eggs. Your sibling shouted, "The chickens are lying again." The whole family clapped, because eggs weren't just food, they were proof that life goes on. By afternoon, you washed your hands, water still cold but clean. You looked up at the sky, no longer solid gray, just pale blue, with a few wispy clouds. You exhaled, sneezed one last time, and laughed. That night, you crawled into bed, muddy, disheveled, with a puffy nose. But your heart felt light. You weren't worried about freezing tomorrow. "I'm just a little concerned about having to scrape 3 more walls, but oh well. You've still got spring to get it done." You bent down and smiled. Something inside you, your heart and your stomach, leaped with joy. Green. Real green. Not gray, not white, not brown. But fresh, vibrant green. So alive, so unexpected it felt like an apology from the earth itself. You ran to call your sibling. They came dashing out, shouting, "There are flowers!" And there were. Tiny wild blossoms in yellow, purple, and pink sprouting along the fence. The first specks of color after months of lifeless gray. You looked around and saw it. Color was returning. The sky looked clearer. Leaves were peeking out. And you heard bees, birds, the sounds of life. You stepped into the patch of earth behind the house, what used to be a swamp of mud, and now showed the first hints of sprouting greens. Your father had planted seeds last week, and now they were pushing through the soil like letters from the ground, written in hope. You knelt and brushed away the damp dirt, revealing tiny bean sprouts still wet with dew. Your mother walked over, basket of seeds in hand. "Your turn to plant," she said. You nodded. You weren't a great farmer, but you planted like you were sending out little wishes. Each seed a tiny prayer. Grow strong. Don't get eaten by birds. Don't get chewed by Greta. And just as you thought that, Greta appeared, from who knows where, and promptly devoured half a row of young onions. You shouted. Your sibling chased her. Greta tore across the yard like she was in a goat Olympics. You just held your head in defeat. Even the villagers seemed lighter. Someone started whistling. Another hung colorful clothes in the windows. One person, you swear, was singing while digging. Off-key, but with a whole heart. Your dad pulled out an old flute and played a few notes. The cat stretched and nodded like it was judging the performance. You burst out laughing, and suddenly realized it had been a long time since you laughed that hard. You picked up a dry stick, sharpened one end, stripped the bark, and started carving. A walking stick. Not that you needed one, but you wanted it. You etched patterns into it, scorched it gently in the fire to darken the wood, and tied colorful yarn around the top. Your sibling asked, "What kind of stick is that?" You said, "It's a spring stick." Nobody knew what that meant, but everyone nodded anyway. You stood in the middle of the field, holding your stick like a flag. The breeze was gentle. The leaves swayed. Sunlight streamed through the trees, not harsh, just warm. Overhead, birds soared, and you wondered, how long have they been gone? History tells us that to medieval peasants, the first colors of spring were nothing short of a miracle. After months of darkness, fog, and monotone days, seeing green leaves, blooming flowers, and a bright sky was the first sign that life hadn't abandoned them. You felt it in your chest, not just because vegetables were growing, but because your heart felt like it was growing back too. Light. It's a bit tender, but no longer heavy like those winter nights under threadbare blankets. You helped your father reshape the field beds, planted mustard greens. Your mother taught you to scatter fireplace ash to help warm the soil. Your sibling made little name signs for the vegetable rows, misspelled, written like a chicken scratch, but you proudly stuck them in the ground anyway. By afternoon, your whole family rested under a tree. The lazy cat stretched across your mother's lap. The chicken snoozed under the bench. You twirled your stick and muttered, "Maybe the harvest will be good this year." Everyone nodded. No one needed to say anything more. You looked up at the sky. It hadn't changed much. Still blue, still breezy, but something inside you had. You were thankful to be here still. With the earth, with your people, with this tender green peeking out after a brutal season. And if some goat ate your new garden tomorrow, you figured you'd still smile. One morning, as you were hauling straw outside to dry, the neighbor lady burst through the gate, hair wild, eyes sparkling like she'd just won the lottery, and shouted, "The market is back." You froze. The market? Seriously? She nodded furiously, like a chicken pecking grain. Really? This weekend, someone from the next village brought the news. The market. 2 magical syllables. You ran into the house yelling, "The market's back!" The whole family jumped up like the roof was on fire. Mom dropped the porridge. Dad tossed his hammer. Your sibling nearly dropped the cat. No one wanted to miss the first spring market. It wasn't just about trading goods. It was the chance to see new people, hear stories from other villages, browse strange items, and sometimes to remember the world was bigger than your muddy little yard. You were tasked with gathering eggs, wrapping dried herbs, and packing barley cakes. Mom rechecked the woven clothes. Your sibling insisted on bringing the goat. Maybe someone will trade it for honey. You replied, "If someone trades Greta for honey, this winter will end sweet as syrup." But in the end, the goat came along. On the market morning, you got up before the sun. The air was cold but no longer sharp. You strapped on your pack, bundled in scarves, and lined up with your family like you were heading on vacation. If vacation meant trudging through mud for 2 hours to trade turnips for salt. On the road, you passed dozens of others, each carrying something. Chickens, eggs, cloth, bread. One person was even walking a goose. Nobody came empty-handed. Anything tradable was worth bringing. When you reached the market, it hit you all at once. The noise, the smells, the colors, a delightful storm smacking you right in the face. There were stalls with dried fish, honey cakes, dyed fabric, miniature knives, rope, and a man in the middle of the square shouting, "Who wants dream mushrooms? Eat 'em, see visions." You looked around, flags fluttering, kids screaming and darting through crowds, elders chewing on bread with solemn nods. The air smelled like smoke, herbs, cinnamon, and something you strongly suspected was goat. Greta, of course. You tried trading dried veggies for salt. Success. Dad haggled passionately and came away with a new knife. Mom swapped her clothes for wooden spoons. Your sibling tried to sell Greta, no takers. But someone did offer a ribbon, so now Greta strutted around with a pink bow around her neck. You gave bartering a go yourself. Traded some bread for dried onions. Once you scored. Another time, you swapped for the tiniest turnip ever in exchange for the driest loaf in history. You stared at the turnip and sighed. Across the square, the traders smiled like they'd just taught you a master class in market economics. Everyone left the market with a story. Someone met a woman who walked from a village 3 days away. Another heard of a town that only raises rabbits. One guy swore there was a tea tree thief on the loose. No one knew what a tea tree was, but the word thief hooked everyone. You wandered past the herbalist's stall. The scent was so strong it almost knocked you back. "Just sniff it, and you'll feel better," the old seller insisted. You almost believed her, until your mom yanked you away just in time, saving you from trading half a sack of onions for a bundle of willpower leaves. By the end of the day, you were completely wiped. Arms sore, legs muddy, back sweaty. But your spirits? Soaring. You had salt, a wooden spoon, a spool of thread, and a story about how Greta nearly knocked over the honey bun stand. Your family headed home at sunset, slower than in the morning, but twice as happy. Your sibling recounted the goat trading saga back. Mom praised your bartering as not bad at all. Dad muttered something about wearing pants without holes next time. As you hung your bag on the wall that night, you looked around and realized the world had gotten bigger. Not because you went far, but because you stepped outside the winter cocoon. You felt the buzz of voices, heard the shouts of vendors, the laughs of strangers, and most importantly, the feeling that you weren't alone. You lay down, head still spinning with market sights and sounds. It was a long, exhausting day, but warm. Like the last ladle of soup, thin but flavorful, and just enough to satisfy. You pulled your blanket up, listened to Greta breathing outside the shed, and whispered, "Next time, maybe someone will trade you for a ribbon in blue." Spring doesn't just bring flowers, sunshine, and birdsong. It also brings mud. A whole lot of mud. Mud from the sky, mud from the ground, mud from places you can't even understand why they're damp. Every time it rains at night, your yard turns into a swamp. You step outside and squelch. Your shoe sinks straight to the ankle. You can yank one foot free, only to lose the other shoe. Your sibling calls this mandatory barefoot artistry. You tried laying stones across the yard, washed away by the rain. You tried scattering straw. Greta ate it. In the end, you accept the truth. For the next 2 months at least, everything you own will be covered in mud. Greta, of course, loves this. She picks a giant puddle in the middle of the yard as her new lounge area and sprawls out like a mud-caked noble. You try to drag her away. She gives you a look. Why leave paradise? You sigh, then chuckle. You can't win against spring. You can't win against goats either. But what gets you is that no matter how hard you try to avoid the mud finds you. You mop the floor. Your cat walks in with 4 perfectly muddy paws. You wash your hands. Your sibling slips into the water basin, splashing it over your head. You wear a fresh tunic, just in time for a chicken to flap by and leave an undeniable souvenir across your shoulder. Each day becomes a small battle against moisture. And you're losing, spectacularly. History tells us that spring was the season of professional mud wading in medieval times. Roads weren't paved, shoes weren't waterproof, and homes constantly needed bailing out from rainwater. But that sogginess made crops sprout, soil soften, and the growing season begin. Your family starts digging ditches, long, crooked, and rarely in the right place. Water still leaks into the kitchen. But at least the chicken coop no longer has its private lake. Your sibling names each trench, Hope Ditch, Despair Ditch, and What Are We Even Digging for Ditch. One day, you head out to check on the mustard greens. You only make it 3 steps before you slip. Not just a little. You fly, literally, and land flat on your backside in a puddle nearly up to your knees. You lie there, wet, cold, and laughing. Not because it's funny, but because you can't laugh. Sometimes, laughter is your only lifeline when spring slaps you down with a perfect muddy flourish. Your sibling runs out shouting, "Are you dead?" You raise a hand from the puddle and groan, still breathing. But it's touch and go. Eventually, you stop trying to dodge the mud. You start playing in it instead. You and your sibling hold an epic mud pit battle. You lose, gloriously. You smear mud on your faces like spa masks. The cat stares at you with judgment. The goat joins in by headbutting your sibling from behind. Mom shouts to the heavens. Dad shakes his head. But when they see you honestly laughing, they mutter, "Well, at least they're happy." You begin to see beauty in the mess. Plants grow faster. Veggies sprout stronger. Birds start nesting under the eaves. Everything's wet, chaotic, and alive. You hang up laundry. Rain pours. You pull it down. The sun shines. You gain a new skill. Acceptance. One afternoon, you stand in the yard, covered in mud, holding a bucket, hair tangled like a bird's nest, and you think, "I've never felt more alive. Not perfect, but real. Not clean, but joyful." You head inside and wash off the mud, not because you have to, but because you want to. You know tomorrow will be muddy again, and you'll be right there, rolling with it. You crawl under your blanket, faintly smelling of earth and spring, and smile. You realize spring isn't just about flowers, sunshine, or birds. It's about finding joy in the mess, laughing even when soaked, dancing even when filthy, and living even when you're not clean. One morning, you step into the garden as usual, not expecting much, just planning to check on the mustard greens, and that's when you see it. A tiny carrot poking its head out of the soil like it's cautiously scouting the world. You yell into the house, "Carrot!" Your mother rushes out, clutching her bonnet. Your father follows with a sickle. Your sibling grabs a basket like they're about to receive royal treasure. Everyone stares at the carrot, barely the size of your pinky finger, as if it's the kingdom's crown jewel. You pull it up, and just as expected, it's small, twisted, a little lopsided, and completely adorable. Your sibling says, "Don't eat it. Let's keep it as a harvest charm." But your mother replies, "No, we eat it, because eating is how we know we're still alive." And just like that, the harvest begins. Not much, just a few sprigs of young greens, some chives, a little wild perilla. But after months of surviving on stored turnips, dried onions, and bread harder than paving stones, this feels like a feast. You and your mother wash the greens, hands freezing but hearts warm. Your sibling runs off to find eggs, because thank the heavens, the chickens are laying again. Your father collects firewood, declaring that tonight calls for a cooked meal. Your mother makes soup, greens, chives, a pinch of salt, some sliced onion, and 1 egg whisked into the pot. It smells so good that you briefly wonder if you've become nobility. Your sibling bakes barley bread, slightly burnt but softer than usual. And you? You slice the carrot, just 1 round, then stash the rest to admire later. In old times, the first meal of spring was called a survival supper. It wasn't grand or filling, but proof that you made it. What you planted, preserved, and cared for was finally giving back. Your home fills with the scent, not of spices, but of warm food after a long hunger. Steam rises from the soup, carrying with it hope and chopped onions. Your sibling runs in circles, yelling, "Feast! Feast!" Then it's time to serve. No tablecloth, no candles, just chipped bowls, wooden spoons, and eyes that glisten. Everyone's hungry, but everyone slows down, as if eating too quickly might scare the joy away. You scoop a spoonful of soup, blow on it, and take a bite. The first feeling was warmth. The second feeling is softness. Third feeling, tears in your eyes from happiness. Fresh greens, rich egg, light, delicate flavors. Nothing fancy, but it's the best thing you've eaten all year. For a while, the table is quiet. Then, laughter. Your sibling shares how the chicken sneezed while laying an egg. Your father mistakes his spoon for the cat's. And Greta, the uninvited goat, wanders into the house, licks the table edge, and eats the leftover greens out of the basket. You don't stop her. You watch and say, well, anyone who survived deserves a meal. After dinner, everyone leans against the wall, bellies full, eyelids drooping. Your mother sighs, no meat needed, just greens and a laugh. Your father plucks a few notes on a tiny lute. Your sibling sketches the carrot while yawning. You sit by the hearth, hands wrapped around a warm bowl of soup. The room dims with the fading light. No one's rushing. No one's thinking about tomorrow. There's just the feeling of enough. For the first time in many months, you are full. Not the full that leaves you breathless, but the kind that fills the hollow places in your chest. You look around. Dirty bowls, a crooked dish towel, the cat curled on a chair, and Greta chewing the door frame. You think, so this is what survival tastes like. You don't write it down. You don't need to. Because the best memories are told in whispers beside the fire. And as you drift off to sleep, leaning against the wall, head resting on your sibling's shoulder, you dream of a carrot field. This time, the carrots are bigger. You wake up to something strange. Not the howl of wind or the creak of old wood, but bird song. Bird song. Soft, high-pitched, and completely unexpected. At first, you think you're dreaming. Then comes a second note. Then, a tiny chorus, chirping and fluttering from the trees behind the house. You sit up, not from cold, but curiosity. You push open the window. A cool breeze rushes in, carrying the scent of grass, flowers, and something sweet you forgot existed. The sound of life. Birds swoop across the canopy. One perches on the roof's edge, head tilted back as if rehearsing for choir practice. Another joins in, off-key. Your sibling sits up, rubbing their eyes and grumbling. Why are they still awake at 4 a.m.? You step outside. The sun hasn't risen fully, but the sky is clear and pale. The air tastes crisp with a hint of sweetness. You look up, then down, and see flowers. Each step lands on a natural white, purple, yellow, and pink embroidery. The first bee zips past your nose, wobbling like it's drunk on nectar. You laugh. Everything is alive. Everything is noisy. But it's the kind of noise that makes you feel grateful. Spring isn't tiptoeing anymore. It's striding into daily life like a conductor leading an orchestra after a long silence. You help your mother tend the beehive, a job equal parts thrilling and mildly terrifying. Your father whispers, "Don't make them angry," as though he's bargaining with winged gods. Your sibling keeps pointing and shouting, "That one's huge!" which makes the whole hive wary. You plant more greens with proper fencing to keep Greta out this time. But of course, there she is, standing by the wall, wide-eyed, admiring the flowers like she's selecting a bouquet. Moments later, she strolls over and eats the 3 prettiest purple blossoms. You yell, she runs. The entire village hears what you call her. But no one stays mad for long, because the village is waking up. Not just literally, truly waking and coming alive. Music drifts from the blacksmith's home. The smell of baking wafts in from the east. Old Mrs. Elka is making her first sweet loaf of the year. Children race barefoot, screaming joyfully as if winter was a gray dream that finally let go. You keep working, hauling water, digging soil, planting scallions. But there's a tune playing in your head. No lyrics, no melody, just a cheerful rhythm, like a bird tapping softly on the earth. The month the birds returned in the Middle Ages was when true beginnings began. Hope was still alive if you survived the winter and still heard birdsong. Those tiny sounds were proof the world kept turning, and you were still part of it. You stop by the neighbor's house to borrow a knife, but stay to hear stories about the birds nesting in their chimney. Then, someone starts singing. Off-key, but full of heart, and everyone claps. That afternoon, you sit behind your house, holding a fistful of grass, eyes closed, ears open. Bees, wind, footsteps in the distance, birds. And then, your sibling sneezes. Ah! Choo! The birds scatter in every direction. You open your eyes to a blue sky that makes your heart feel light, almost like you could fly, if only in spirit. That night you lie near the window, left slightly open. A gentle breeze drifts in. Moonlight paints silver patterns on the wall. Your sibling whispers, "Will the birds sing again tomorrow?" You answer, "Definitely. And if they don't, we will." You smile, eyes drifting closed. After a winter of silence, every sound feels sacred now, even the off-key birds. This evening, it's no longer cold. You don't need to stoke the fire. No need to wear 3 layers. No need to huddle under a blanket beside the hearth. Instead, you sit on the porch, your back resting against a wooden pillar, watching the sunlight turn honey gold before dissolving into the open air. The rest of your family is the same. Everyone is in their little corner. But no one is in a rush. Your father mends a basket handle. Your mother spins the thread. Your sibling doodles in the dirt with a dry twig. The cat is sprawled like a used rag. And Greta, the goat, is trying to climb into your dad's lap. No one understands why a 40-kilogram goat insists on acting like a kitten. You chuckle, a light laugh, for no particular reason. Because sometimes things are simply peaceful. No one says much. But today's silence isn't like winter's silence. It's not heavy, not biting. It's light. Like a thin cloth laid gently across the evening, inviting you to sit, breathe deeply, and think of nothing. Your mother hums just a few old, half-remembered song lines. But somehow, it's magical. Your sibling hums along. Your father taps a rhythm on the basket with his fingers. You murmur too, not knowing the words, but knowing the feeling. And just like that, the whole family sings. Quietly, like whispering to the breeze. In the Middle Ages, spring evenings like this were precious. No more fear that the dark would bring biting cold. No more frantic cooking, fire building, heat preserving. Just moments of being together, telling stories, singing, watching the sky. That was enough, and it felt full. You tell a story about the first time you tried washing clothes in icy water and couldn't feel your hands after. Everyone laughs. Your sibling brings up the time you slipped into a mud puddle and lay there like you were meditating. Your mother tells her go-to line. "Back in my day, winters were worse," a phrase she uses to win every cold weather story. Greta, of course, barges in like she has her tale to tell. She gnaws the chair leg and nudges your arm as if to say, "Yeah, I remember that too." You pour water into a clay bowl. It's cool, clear, and it doesn't need to be boiled. For the first time in months, drinking water doesn't make your teeth ache. A fresh batch of bread cools on the tray. It's sprinkled with dried seeds and a dab of honey. Rare, but today feels like a celebration. Each person gets a small piece, eaten slowly as if stretching the joy. You look up and are quietly surprised. Stars. 1 or 2 at first, then more, twinkling in the pale sky. You'd forgotten what they looked like. Winter had hidden them, but now they gleam like they've just been rinsed clean by spring dew. You point. Stars. Your sibling looks up, eyes wide. Your dad starts naming constellations. Maybe made up, but everyone nods. Your mother exhales. Haven't seen them in so long. You don't remember when you started feeling tired. Your legs are still tucked under the blanket, your back resting against the post, your eyes still gazing upward, but your eyelids are growing heavier. Not the drained kind of tired, but the satisfied kind. The kind you feel after a long day of doing something that matters. The cat curls into your shoulder. Your sibling falls asleep, crumbs still clinging to their chin. Your dad quietly gathers the tools. Your mom stifles a yawn and says, "Tomorrow, let's plant more beans." You nod, though your eyes are already closed. You're not sure why you didn't go inside. You know this. The breeze is gentle, the ground is warm, the sky is still. And beneath the stars, you feel like you're being cradled by something vast and tender. You drift into sleep, not startled, not worried, just slipping gently, like gliding under a blanket stitched from moonlight. And when a star shoots across the sky, you don't see it, but you're flying right beside it in your dreams. Light as air, no mud clinging, no cold biting, just laughter echoing from the porch behind you. This morning you woke up, not to bird song, cold, or the sound of cats scampering across the roof, but simply because you'd had enough sleep. You opened your eyes and stared at the rough wooden ceiling, still cracked, still smelling faintly of old straw, but without the weight of tension. It's just a new day, ordinary, and you smiled at that thought. You put on a shirt, just one layer, no shivering, no bracing yourself. You slipped into your boots. They were damp, but not frozen. You stepped onto the porch and stretched, sunlight brushing your cheek like a gentle hug. Greta was right there, gnawing on the laundry line. You sighed. "Please." She paused for exactly 2 seconds, then resumed chewing. You banged the water trough. She turned and snorted as if arguing. You glared at her. She glared back. And somehow, you both won. You got to work, just like every other day. Herding the chickens, gathering firewood, sowing more vegetables, and mending the torn egg sack. No one ordered you. No one rushed you. You did it like breathing, steady, natural. Some rhythm had returned, not lively, not sluggish, just right. Every step you took carried the quiet affirmation, "I'm alive." You visited the neighbors, brought them a small bunch of baby greens and traded them for salt. You stood around and chatted longer than usual. Someone mentioned the winter, but their tone was softer. It's like recalling a far-off story. No more fear, just memory. You helped them patch the fence, tying bamboo stakes, mending the gap where someone's goat, no names, but everyone glanced at Greta, once slipped through. The village laughed when someone shouted, "No fence is goat-proof unless it's made of morals." You felt stronger. It is not strong like lifting a boulder, but strong from within, lighter, steadier. You weren't thinking, "How do I survive on Chum anymore?" Now it was. What should I do next? You thought about the real planting season ahead. You thought about learning how to dye fabric. You even thought, maybe I'll build a little reading hut by the field. You don't own any books yet, but it's still a lovely idea. Before, all you thought about was tomorrow. Whether there'd be food, whether the hens would lay, whether the night would be too cold. But now, your thoughts stretched further. Summer, autumn. The new shirt your mother promised to sew. The basket your siblings planning to weave. And you realized you'd crossed into a new season of self. You weren't someone hiding from the cold anymore. You were someone truly living again. Someone slowly rebuilding the world. Even if that world was just a tidier yard, a straighter row of vegetables, or a morning where you didn't wake in a jolt. You walked home carrying a bundle of sweet grass picked by the stream. Your father was patching the kitchen roof. Your mother was sorting seeds. Your sibling was threading flowers into a little crown. The cat slept on the roof. And the goat? You didn't see her, and chose not to look. Lunch was soft bread and vegetable broth. No meat, but filling, warming, and delicious. As afternoon rolled in, you wiped the floor. Not because it was filthy, but because you wanted it clean. You straightened the cloth hanging by the door. You checked the window latches. Not because the wind was biting, but out of the habit of care. And you found yourself loving those habits. Evening came. The family gathered, no special occasion. Just a candle, a few small stories, the cat's quiet breathing, and the soft crackle of the fire. You looked around and suddenly understood. Normal is the most precious thing, not grand, not dramatic, but solid. A day passed, gently, fully, no surprises, but everything you needed. You lay down, listening to the faint chirping outside the porch, and closed your eyes, hoping for nothing more, because you were already resting in a quiet kind of miracle called normal. You wake up, and nothing seems different. But you know it the moment your eyes open. You've made it. No more uneasy thoughts clinging to your ribs. No more counting turnips or firewood. No more lying awake, straining to hear how the wind blows, or guessing how cold the night will get. You wake, and feel enough. You step outside. The sun isn't harsh. The breeze is just right. Young grass spills over the edges of the fields. Birds are still singing. The cat is still napping. Your little sibling is still singing the wrong lyrics. And Greta, yes, the legendary goat, is once again trying to climb the water jar like today's the day she reclaims the throne. You look at her, shake your head, and laugh. Then you laugh again, because it's all still here. You, your family, the yard, the just sprouted cabbages. The blanket is drying in the sun, the crack in the wall, and that faint echo of laughter in the wind. Nothing new, but every little thing is marked by the days you've come through. You think back on the past months, not sure how long they lasted, but each day is etched into memory like a step on a staircase you've climbed. It was cold. There was hunger. There was exhaustion. But you're still here. You remember the first time your hands bled from hauling water. The time you forgot to light the fire and woke to frozen water. The night your family ate burnt bread and pretended it was delicious. The time you screamed because of a frog in your boot. And the time you collapsed into a puddle and laughed like you just inherited the world. No one gets through winter alone. You know that now better than anyone. You glance at your mother, sowing seeds into the soil. Your father is pruning dead branches. Your sibling is scribbling names for the cat onto a piece of wood. Every person here is part of this victory. And not just them. The neighbors helped. Strangers too. Sometimes, a shared bowl of soup or a well-timed joke was enough to help you stay upright. History talks about wars and kings. But truly, surviving winter is the most significant victory of ordinary people. You say thank you to the weather, to the sunlight, to the birds that never sleep. And yes, to Greta, bleating bee from the corner of the yard like an overly enthusiastic morning alarm. You find a small patch of dirt behind the kitchen. You dig a tiny hole, not for vegetables, but for a little tree you sprouted from a seed last season. It's not big, not special, but it's yours. You lower it gently into the earth and press the soil around it, hands still muddy. Then exhale, softly. For next year, you whisper. It's not a vow. It's not a grand vision. Just a small marker for you, the earth, and the memory. You don't know if the tree will make it, but you know this. You did. As evening comes, you wash your hands. No shivering. You change clothes. No more layers. You carry a bowl of cabbage soup, steaming, humble, more satisfying than any feast. Night falls, and you sit with your family. No celebration, just candles. A few quiet stories, laughter, breathing, of cats, of people, of the wind. You glance up at the ceiling, watch the candlelight flicker. You close your eyes, and feel light. You didn't just survive, you grew. Winter didn't wear you down, it shaped you. It taught you to cherish the light, the bird's song, even the smell of burnt bread, and somehow even the sound of Greta chewing rope. You didn't become a hero. You didn't need to. You became yourself, firmer, softer, and aware now that to survive is its quiet kind of love for life. You pull the blanket up to your chest. Listen to the night hum around you. You know tomorrow you'll wake again, work again, scratch your head at whatever new damage the goat has caused. But for now, you only need one thing: sleep. Deep, gentle, and full of the knowing. You've come through a long season, and now you are safe. And now, with your belly full, your mouth at rest, and the story told to its end, you stay seated, not out of hunger, but simply because you're not ready for it to be over. The fire dies low. A soft breeze rustles the eaves. The tablecloth still holds a few lonely crumbs. The wooden spoon rests quietly, its work complete. And you are left with yourself and the gentle warmth of small, humble bites, each filled with more meaning than they let on. You've made it through an entire feast, not of wine or royal banquets, but of little things, crisp, tender, slightly burnt, perfectly sweet, gently salted. Once tucked into cloth pouches and hidden in sleeves, food was scraped from the bottom of pots. And now, the world has quieted. You let yourself sink. The blanket pulled up to your chest, eyes closed, a faint smile still lingering. There's nothing left to do. There is nothing left to think about, only to breathe, and let the night, with all its softness, hold you. Because you made it, not just through a winter, but through everything. Sleep well, dear one.